Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions for Tuesday, December the 13th, 2022. There's a movie, I'm not terribly fond of it. I don't think I've seen it all the way through. It was called Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby. Comedian Will Ferrell plays this race car driver, and it's just kind of really sort of silly. But at one point, he has a prayer. And he says, "Dear 8 pound, 6 ounce newborn baby Jesus, in your golden fleece diapers with your curled up little fist pawing at the air." And when someone points out to him that he was a grown man, he had a beard, Ricky Bobby says, "Well, I like the baby version the best." In these weeks before Christmas, of course, our minds are focused on the babe of Bethlehem, on the baby Jesus. And there's great significance in that, and I'm going to talk about that on Christmas Eve. But our lesson this past Sunday from Isaiah 42 points us to, I guess, Jesus' mission, you might say. It is the first of 4 servant songs in Isaiah. They're in Isaiah 42, which was our reading, also in Isaiah 49, Isaiah 50, and Isaiah 52 to 53. They come from this middle section of the book of Isaiah. It's believed that there's the original Isaiah and that a Deutero or second Isaiah was writing. The original Isaiah wrote during or prior to the Babylonian exile or Babylonian captivity. The middle section, Deutero or second Isaiah, maybe a disciple or follower of the original Isaiah's writing during the Babylonian exile. And then some even break it down that the last the chapters of the book of Isaiah are third Isaiah, written kind of after the exile. At least that's where scholars are talk about it. But here in Isaiah 42, which we're pretty confident was written again during the time of the Babylonian exile, we hear some words that definitely, as they were interpreted centuries later in light of Jesus, made perfect sense. Isaiah 42, verses 1 through 4. "Here is my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen, in whom my soul delights. Put my spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to the nations." And then in verse 3, "He will faithfully bring forth justice." And finally, in verse 4, "He will not grow faint or be crushed till he's established justice in the earth." So this is the servant of God who has come to bring justice. Maybe we'll talk about the other servant songs briefly tomorrow. That word servant is ebed. It means slave or servant. Interestingly enough, it comes from a root word that meant to work or to labor. So this is seeing Jesus in this light is unique, because he was not, he was not the Messiah they were expecting by any means. Someone once wrote a little piece called "How to Be a Servant," and said you need to answer a very important question. Are you more interested in being served or being a servant? And relates the story. A first grade teacher once asked her students, "What do you do to help at home?" The little girl said, "Well, I dry the dishes." One of the little boys said, "Well, I sweep the floor." Another one said, "I feed and water the dog." And every student in the class had something to contribute, except for one little boy sitting in the back. And the teacher looked at him and asked, "Well, what do you do to help out at home?" And he said, "I stay out of the way." A couple things there that maybe that was a good thing. I don't know much about who this child was, but in light of the church and of life, it's all too common, all too tempting for us to just kind of stay out of the way, not get involved, not do something. But a servant's heart is one who comes to, again, work for others, to labor, to serve. And I've told this story before, but Dwight Moody was a great evangelist of the 19th century. And there was an incident that occurred that speaks clearly. Again, I've used this before, even in the daily devotions, but I never grow tired of the story or of sharing it. It seems that a large group of European pastors had come to one of his Northfield Bible Conferences in Massachusetts. This again in the late 1800s. And following the European customs of that day, the guests put their shoes outside the rooms that night to be cleaned by the hall servants rather. But of course, this was America. There were no hall servants. But walking the dormitory halls that night, Moody saw the shoes. He determined he didn't want to embarrass his brothers from Europe. So he mentioned the need to some ministerial students who were there, but they wanted to stay out of the way, right? They had either answered him in silence or made some pious excuses. So what did he do? He returned to the dorm, gathered up the shoes, and all alone in his own room, the world's famous evangelist of that time began to clean and polish the shoes, and probably took him hours, of course, to do that. Only the unexpected arrival of one of his friends in the midst of the work revealed his secret. Well, when the foreign visitors opened their doors the next morning, the shoes were shined, just as they had hoped and expected, but they never knew by whom. Moody told no one. His friend, though, however, told a few people, and during the rest of the conference, different men volunteered to shine the shoes. A servant's heart is to see a need and to fill that need. And clearly, Isaiah is talking about a servant who's going to bring forth justice. We're going to talk about justice this week as well. But Jesus had a servant's heart. Jesus was this servant that Isaiah talked about, at least the possibility of someone like that. And Jesus certainly fulfilled that role and set an example for us to be servants in our own lives. And so we'll start off the week here thinking about servanthood. We'll talk more about those servant songs in the book of Isaiah, talk about justice, talk about being a light to the nations, a lot of stuff. Hope you can join me the next 4 days. Until tomorrow, take care. Bye.